for 35 years, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't understand, what it meant to truly have a conversation with Jesus.
So you started seeking.
That's right.
Hello and welcome back to The Uncomfortable Truth. We're glad to have you today. We appreciate you joining us. Hit those buttons at the bottom. Help us reach more people for Jesus. Today we're going to get uncomfortable with Obie Baker. Welcome, Obie Baker, to the show.
First time on the show.
Yeah, man.
Really excited.
First time, long time fan.
Yeah, long time fan.
We don't have a guest today.
Uncomfortable.
We're going to try to make Obie as uncomfortable as possible.
It's usually not too difficult to do that.
Okay,
but hey,
if I see some sweat beads piling up, do I need to slow down a little bit?
man, lean into it.
Okay, we'll lean in. Man, we've you and I have our history kind of started about 5 years ago. I was doing some work for you, and we just kind of connected and started talking about our lives and our walk with the Lord. And I feel like you had a transition at that point of like really dedicating your life to the Lord. But let's go back before that.
Yeah.
Let's go back to childhood and how you grew up and how faith and family influenced you from those years of being born to, let's call it, the age of around 34, 35.
Okay. So, I was basically born in the church. I'm sure if I was born on a Friday and Mom took me home on Saturday morning, Sunday morning I was in church. That's a fact. Like
that's the old Bible Belt way.
Dad would have made sure that the baby boy was in church on day 2 of life, so that he could take him around and show him to everybody. And so I was in my first Sunday school class on day 3 of life, if that even happened.
Yeah.
Whatever the first Sunday was after birth, and was raised that way for my whole childhood. I walked. Our house was probably 1.5 miles from the church. I learned to drive on the roads between the house and church.
At what age?
I started driving sitting in my dad's lap, when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, just sitting in his lap, driving, back and forth wherever we would go. His office, his work was probably another 1/2 mile to 1 mile past the church, same direction. So we would go to his work, a lot, and the ice. We had lots of we have a big family, and we had lots of family gatherings, and we would drive to what he called the Bumpus. The Bumpus is where he worked, and they had a big ice machine, and so Dad's responsibility at all the family gatherings was to bring a couple things of ice. So he always took pride in the fact that he had access to a big ice machine, and we always had ice chest full of ice sitting at the house.
Courtney's dad was a lot like that with the field house. He's the ice guy. Yeah. It's like, if you're the ice guy, this is a serious task.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. I mean, you just knew when Dad threw the coolers in the back of the truck where you're heading
going to get some
Bumpus.
ice.
And I liked it because I knew I was going to get to drive, going up there. So, from 8 to 12, I would say that's when I was kind of sitting in Dad's lap. When I was 12 years old, Dad forgot his Bible one day, as we got to the church, realized it, tossed me the keys to his 82 Chevrolet and told me to drive back home and get his Bible.
Chevrolet half-ton?
Chevrolet half-ton.
Fleetside?
Yep. That's right.
I feel like every dad had one.
That was my first truck.
Okay.
I started driving by myself back and forth to church when I was 12 years old.
So where were you at in the birth order?
I'm the baby.
Okay. And what are the age gaps in your family?
My sister's 5 years older than me, and my brother's 7 years older than me.
Okay.
So
you're in church all the time, right? Yep. Obviously, you're hearing the word preached, and Southern Baptist, from my experience and your experience, I know as well, it's kind of evolved. Okay, from what we've grown up in to now. When did you get saved?
I was 8.
What was that experience like for you?
It was at a revival. For those that don't know what a revival is, here in the Bible Belt, we will have, revivals, from time to time. I don't remember the last time that we've called a revival and actually had one, but
7 to 10 years ago, we had them at our old church.
Okay. So yeah, we would set up a big circus tent basically in the parking lot of the church, and we would have, outside speakers come in and preach the gospel, and, just kind of bring a new perspective in.
You always have food at least one night to get all the heathens there.
That's right. That's exactly right. And anyway, we had a revival, and a revival is like usually 3 or 4 nights, maybe 5 nights in a row of church, and praising the Lord and getting fed the word, and so we would get. It was at one of those revivals where I just felt the call to accept Christ and become a Christ follower in that moment. Now,
8 years old.
At 8 years old, I've got. It's funny. I went for 25 years and couldn't remember exactly how old I was. Mm-hmm. I thought it was 7, 8, 9. I couldn't remember. And just like less than a year ago, Dad brought me a box, and my Bible that I had been given when I got saved was in that box, and I opened it up and it had the date.
Was that important to you to know that?
It always made me feel uncomfortable not knowing it.
Dude, okay. I'm with you there. I got saved in 1993. I was 10 years old.
Yep.
And I knew for the majority of my life, I knew it was at a Paul Vick revival that they had at the school. They did it at the school auditorium.
Got saved at a revival too.
Yeah. But for probably 20 years, I didn't know. Same story. My mom gives me my old Bible, and it says when I got saved in there. And it gave me some relief, because anybody I'd ever talked to before that, especially here, was like, I got saved on August 17th, 1994, and Jesus just changed my life forever.
That's what you hear people say.
And I wanted to know. And I didn't know, yep. So it was always like, I don't really remember when I got saved, but I know where I was at.
Exactly.
It's kind of silly, isn't it?
It is silly, but it's also one of those things that made me. I don't know if it just fully made me question my salvation. That I was 8 years old, and, in my mind, as I got older and as I thought about, really dug into my relationship with God, and did it at that point, was it truly able to elicit a change in my life? And I believe that as Christians, when we accept Christ and when we choose to follow him, that change is inevitable. I believe that, when you truly receive the Holy Spirit in your heart, you begin a journey. And I believe that journey involves Christ making you more like him every day. And I always struggled with the fact that I don't remember feeling that change after that point. Maybe there was a period of excitement, after and being able to tell people that, I accepted Jesus and I got baptized. But I don't remember it being any deeper than that. I don't remember feeling a sense of, I'm a new creation. I'm a newly born. My soul has been born again.
It's interesting because you hear different people getting saved stories, and the older I've gotten, the more I've been able to reconcile what that actually should be versus what we may think it should have looked like, depending on other people's stories.
Yeah,
because some people you hear, I got saved, and the Lord immediately changed me or took away some desires that I had, and then some people you hear, I got saved and it took a while, through the sanctification.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I kind of relate it to being married is like when you get married, you're super excited and you're living on love for, first couple of years. It's like it's new, it's great, and then there's inevitably a lull that we're learning how to become closer to our partners. And at a certain point you realize is like these feelings aren't going to get me through this.
Right.
It's the commitment to the decision that I made however many years ago and the commitment to this person that I know that I'm responsible for that makes me strive more. And I kind of relate that to our Christian faith. So you got saved at 8.
Yeah.
And what was your journey like from 8 to say 35 of what did you think the idea of being a Christian was from 8 to 35 and what big moments in your life kind of have impacted you from those moments? You're 40 now, right?
40 years old.
So we're going to get to that point at some point.
That's a good question. So as far as like what my life looked like post accepting Christ when I was 8 years old, how did it impact me? I just felt like being a Christian kind of was being a good person. I knew that I was supposed to read my Bible. I knew that I was supposed to be in church. And I knew that I was supposed to be a good person, and what that actually meant, was kind of different, I mean, I feel like we're all a product of the people that helped raise us, and so I was fortunate to be able to be raised by a lot of good men and women, who shared common beliefs in that we do have a Savior, and He does want good for our lives, and He does want us to be obedient to His commandments. And so, I wasn't looking at the 10 Commandments every day, but I had a great mom and dad who strived to be like Jesus in their daily lives. And so from a young age, I was taught to put myself second. I was taught to love everyone, and that there wasn't anyone that God didn't love, and that I was to be the same, and love everyone. And so, I felt like that I was a good boy, Yeah. if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense, because our faith is driven in those moments by the people around us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's natural. We're at 9, 10, 11, 12 through 16, 17, 18. We are forming opinions based on the closest people to us.
Yeah.
And I don't know when that shift is, where I know it was a moment for me of like, there's a certain point in my life, and it continues to happen the older I get, is like questioning everything and what I was taught here, not for a bad reason,
right?
Just questioning it based on how it lines up with the Bible.
Yeah.
And were the things that I was taught, do they line up with the Bible? And if they were, we can just check those off and move on. But if I'm not sure, then I have to figure out why.
Right.
So in your story, have there been moments like that to where what you thought you knew maybe wasn't true? Have there been triggers or instances in your life that hit you so hard that it caused you to question what you thought you knew?
When I was 13, when I was 12, my mom started sleeping in another room in the house, and that threw me for a loop. Mm-hmm. Because I would say that I was pretty not in tune with necessarily what was going on as it relates to my parents' marriage. I just assumed all was well.
I mean, what 12-year-old is in tune with that?
Yeah.
If you feel like you were in a secure, what you felt like was a secure household at that time, mom and dad love each other,
100%.
Everything's good.
100%. And didn't really find out until I was a young man, in my 20s, with some of the things that they were really going through. But that her sleeping in the other room led to a divorce, and they divorced when I was 13. Mom left. I stayed with my dad, which divorce was a sin in my eyes, because that's the way that I was taught. And it was not biblical. Divorce was not biblical unless some pretty strict parameters or accusations or problems occurred in the marriage, and so anyway,
that's what you were taught at that.
That's what I was taught.
Point.
That's the way that I was taught, and so that threw me for a loop. It threw me for a big loop. Just never having seen my parents, who were basically leading me with this script that they led themselves, which was the Bible, almost going against what the Bible says about marriage and splitting up. And I was, again, raised, like I had a great relationship with both mom and my dad, and really close with my mom. I was a mama's boy, most of my life. And until, it was just me and dad, and it transitioned to a little bit more, of a growing relationship with my dad at that time, because from the ages of 13 until 17, when he remarried, it was just me and him. And so my mom was really she wasn't completely absent during that time, but there was some of the time where she was she was in another country for an entire year during that time. So I didn't even see her. You
talk to her at all?
Talked to her a little bit.
Okay.
She would call and check on me. And
what do you remember feeling like in that 2-year period? Like the bombshell hits you, mom and dad are getting a what? A divorce? Like what? Is that kind of how you felt about it?
It was like I was losing a piece of myself.
Yeah.
Like my mom was, she was my comfort, my go-to for everything. She was everything, and then she was gone.
Did your mom stay home at this point? Was your dad working and your mom stay home, or was she working outside the home?
My mom stayed home my entire childhood.
So taking you to school, picking you up from school, taking you to ball practice, picking you up from cheering you on in the stands, like, hey, it's my boy, I love you. Like all that stuff's going on, and then it's just not.
Gone. She's literally in another country for pretty abruptly for in the Middle East for an entire year, from the age of 13 to 14 ish. And so, I went from this very, very deep relationship with my mom to she was gone. And so, it was a.
How'd your dad explain that to you?
Dad was a mess.
Okay.
Dad was a mess. He did not want the marriage to end. Wanted to figure out how to reconcile the marriage, and it just was never
couldn't.
reconciled.
Yeah.
And so just lots of tough nights with Dad.
Who'd you go to for support in that time?
I had some really, really great friends, and I had some friends' parents who stepped in and took on roles of kind of being aunts and uncles, or second moms and second dads, and just stepped in and really helped to almost feel like not much had changed, and just because, like,
as much as they could.
Yeah. And so I was truly blessed during that time. I remember being heartbroken, but I remember more than anything, how heartbroken my dad was, because I was with him every day, and, watching my dad, cry himself to sleep some nights, and just, that was,
that breaks my heart knowing your dad.
Dude,
Golly, you'll make me cry. I spent a week with your dad this past week working, and
it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Just because, he's your dad. You know, I don't know that
you don't want it. Like, we don't want to see our dad, like, as much as we might say, like, want to see emotional sides of our dad older when we understand. When we're young, like, seeing dad cry,
I don't know that
feels like the world stops.
I don't know that I had ever seen my dad cry.
Yeah.
And then watching him go, through that, it was something that certainly impacted me.
What would your dad say about that point of his life if he was sitting here right now?
I think he would say it was some of the hardest days he's ever had.
Yeah.
Trying to understand, pleading with the Lord I feel like it was maybe more pleading with the Lord to bring back my mom than it was to like help him get through it, and so obviously there was a point where he realized that was not going to happen. But I feel like that he would say that was some of the more difficult days of his life.
One of the coolest things that I just recently learned, I think it's in Romans, and it talks about the Holy Spirit as our intercessor. So we're praying, and the Holy Spirit is hearing our prayers, and then the Holy Spirit has the job to take that to God. And so his job is, it says that the Holy Spirit's job is not to take our actual prayers to the Lord, but the Holy Spirit will take what we need to the Lord, knowing what we need more than we do. So we may be praying for this, and this to happen, and it's like the Holy Spirit deciphers that and is like, okay, this is what you really need. God, can you do this for them?
Isn't that a refreshing thought, though?
Like, it's very refreshing.
Like, to know that we don't have to know necessarily what we need, but God knows what we need. And so we're going to we're going to receive it whether we are praying for it or not. And maybe that's an unanswered prayer. Maybe the unanswered prayer is what we need. But
maybe the answered prayers are prayers that we would call unanswered prayers as well.
Yeah. Yep. It is
interesting to think about.
You think about Garth Brooks.
Yeah.
I think about
don't even start singing, dude.
Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. But
remember when you're talking to the man upstairs. Okay, so that was a very difficult time in your life. From that age of 12, 13 to 18, when you're getting ready to head out of the house, like how did your relationship with the Lord? What was the function there? How did it work? What were your thoughts surrounding that and your feelings?
I feel like that from the time that my parents divorced until I got out of probably college, until I got into college. So from that, 13, 14 to say 18, 19 years old, I felt maybe a little rebellious. I certainly wouldn't compare my rebellion to some people's rebellion.
Sure.
But when I say rebellious, I just mean not wanting to go to church, not wanting to, just wanting to sleep in on Sundays, wanting to just not go.
Do you feel like you were hardened some towards the Lord?
I think that I was just in a place where I didn't want to hear what was right and what was wrong. I didn't want to hear, I didn't want to think about my relationship with Christ. I wanted to just be a teenager and chase girls and, be with my friends and play games and focus on sports. And I would, during that time, I was very focused on sports. I was, how can I get better at basketball, at baseball? So I really dove in to sports during that time.
You feel like that was like your coping mechanism?
I do, 100%.
Yeah.
I think that my coaches would probably, tell you that, he had a fervent work ethic that was
Yeah.
just not really like most of the kids that we coached.
Do you
And
feel like they might recognize that as a chip on your shoulder of like, I'm going to outwork everybody here?
I think
like,
so.
Got a little anger inside from this situation and stuff that I've dealt with.
I think that's very much the
The
way.
coach can use that though.
Yeah.
You need some fire.
And they did, but it was, I would say that's where I was during that time. I feel like that, I can't recall a time during high school where I felt just compelled to chase after Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And then, going into college, I had a girlfriend that was a devout Christian and brought me back into the church, and
Girls can do that, huh?
she did it. She brought me back into the church and I was in church every week and because she was going to be in church every week, and so I think it was just part of God's plan on taking me one step back closer to Him. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, we broke up like senior year in college. But there had been a revival in my heart, that I didn't even realize at the time, that I had grown closer to the Lord.
Even after, so your intentions in the beginning were to go to church because she was there. By the time that she was no longer in the picture, did you still have that desire, or did the breakup kind of throw you off for a while?
It threw me off for a little while, but not long. Okay. I don't think it threw me off for very long. I recognized during that time that I needed to be in church, and I needed the Lord. I needed the Lord in my life in order to experience, in order to get through the tough parts of life. Yeah. And by that time I had seen my dad
make it through,
come out.
Yeah.
And be, in a good spot. And I had seen his, I guess you could say his discipline,
steadfastness.
Yeah. His steadfastness in continuing to pursue God in his lowest moment, come out of that, and just he got remarried, and he just didn't miss a beat when it came to continuing to honor God and know that God's plan for his life was still happening,
and also to continue to point his kids towards Christ. Tell the story about what he did for you.
Yeah. So during those teenage years where it was just me and him at home, he would have to be at work really early. Dad worked in the oil field. And so he would get up every morning at about, he probably got up around 4:30 or 5 a.m. and he wrote me daily devotionals every day for probably 4 or 5 years. And he
like
would
sitting down writing on a piece of paper.
He would sit down at our kitchen table with a 5-star spiral, what do you call them?
Notebook.
A notebook.
Yeah.
And fill up an entire page every morning for 5 years.
Was this something that he was taking from a devotional that he was doing, or he's just reading the Bible and then translating it for you?
He was reading the Bible. He would read the Bible, and then he would write his thoughts down about what he read to me, and I read it every day. That was my first thing every morning before I went to school. Is by the time that I don't know how many notebooks he had completely filled up, but it was full.
So at a time that you're just like, God, I don't really care. Like, I'm hurt. I don't want to deal with this stuff. Your dad's,
he still reminded me daily.
Yeah, he's like, hey man,
and I don't necessarily recognize it
at that time.
but I recognize it now.
Yeah. I mean, the dedication there is impactful. As a dad, I think, like, what am I doing for my kids on a daily basis? Am I praying for them? Am I, interceding on their behalf? Am I supporting them in a healthy and disciplinary way? Am I pointing them to Jesus with my actions and my words?
Yeah. And I've never experienced a better example of that in your deepest moments of sorrow. Still getting up, getting into the Word. My dad knew that his only hope was in that book. He knew it. And thankfully, God revealed that to me too.
Yeah.
But without him, I'm not sure that I ever would have come back
where
so
you're at now.
Yeah.
So 22, 23, bad breakup, you get out of college. Where's your pursuit? Like, how does your pursuit of Jesus change from that point?
I knew that I needed Jesus. I knew that I needed him in my life. My pursuit from my senior year until I met Amy. I'd met Amy, but until
Amy's his wife. If you haven't met her yet, she's on one of the past shows. Her and my wife. If you want to watch that. Well,
Amy and I not met. We reconnected, I guess you could say. That was in 2007. 2007. Anyway, so I was 24 years old, something like that, or maybe 22. I was 22 years old. Anyway, so from 18 to 22, I knew I needed the Lord, but I didn't live like I needed the Lord. I just was sowing some wild oats, and not, again, I felt like getting back into church from 18 to that time, it helped me know that, I needed him, but again, I wasn't necessarily living it. It was just almost like this seed was replanted back in my soul, that was continuing to get cultivated and cropped, and it was continuing to grow up all the way up through the beginning of my marriage and into my early years of my career.
Yeah.
So it was, again, during all that time, I never truly felt close to the Lord.
Yeah.
I never felt that way.
So you said in high school, you put everything you had into sports. And then the sucky thing about getting out of high school is that if we don't have an opportunity to play in college, or even if we play in college, there's a piece of a man that's missing this competitive spirit. After college and you start your career, do you feel like you put some of that into whatever business or career that you were working on at the time, or?
Oh yeah. Dad instilled in us a very rigid work ethic. It was, mom and dad both hard workers. That's all they ever known. They didn't have any other way to get by than off of hard work. And so mom and dad always just really instilled that rigid work ethic in us. And so that parlayed into sports, which then parlayed after college into my career. And so Sean, my brother, had started a business when I was probably 20. So that would have been, in 2003, 2004, maybe 19, 20. And he, whenever I graduated, I started working with him because I had a little break in the way that my graduation happened. And I was going to be a coach and a teacher. And, that's what I got my degree in. I was certified, was ready to go, had a job lined up.
Yeah.
And was getting ready to go coach. had not signed contracts or anything yet, but had a job. I'd interviewed, they'd agreed to hire me, and Sean talked me into giving him a year with Antler Works. You got the rest of your life to go coach and teach. Let's see if we can grow this business.
This is a big brother. Okay.
That's right.
All right.
And that year was in 2006. And we started from 2006 to 2007 was the completion of that year. And it was me and him and another guy, and the business started growing, and it kept growing, and it kept growing until 2012 when we had taken that business from just me and him and another guy to 15 employees, and had gone from working in a shed, a little ragland shed in his backyard, to a 10,000 square foot facility on Highway 80, and churning out a lot of business, and so anyway, a lot of stuff learned in that time. Yeah. But it was very much a product. What happened during those years was very much a product of the way Sean and I were raised in the way of working hard, and treating people right, and giving God the glory for any accomplishments that we ever had, and knowing that it wasn't us, it was him, and but also during that time, anytime you have success in that in the business arena, or at least for me, for my sake, during that time, there was also maybe I'm special. Yeah. Maybe I've got
creeps in. Doesn't
it gets in there, and maybe I've got, something that other people don't have. And look at what we've done here, and so, it's not hard when the world starts saying things to you and seeing things that you're doing and praising those things, and you're accomplishing worldly good. Yeah. And kind of little sparks of the American dream kind of looking at this situation. Yeah. Certainly not, it was a small business that
but for you guys, it was a big deal.
For sure.
It was a big deal.
Oh yeah. I tell everybody, the first full year, I think we did $113,000 in gross sales. Yeah. And we had 3 guys. I think I might have gotten paid, $20,000 that year.
For the year.
Yeah. Maybe.
And y'all felt like you're just killing it.
We thought we hit the lottery, bro.
Yeah. I know the feeling.
Like we thought that we hit the lottery. Yeah. And I remember we came back from this first show, and we did like $13,000 or $18,000 at this show, this Dallas market that we went to, and we thought, we're gonna be rich. Yeah. We're going. This thing's going viral.
Bro, I remember the first house that I flipped, and I think I was in it 3 ways, 3 partners, and I think I made $7,000 from a house flip. It took us a month and a half to do it, and I don't think I'd ever held a $7,000 check or $7,000 cash in my hand up to this point at one time, and I'm like, I'm about to change the world.
Yeah, exactly. So that's that. Over the course of that time, we really grew that company. We never figured out business. We figured out what we didn't know about business. We handled the outlying things really well, and the infrastructure we really sucked at. We weren't accountants. We didn't have business degrees.
You're great at making your product and relationships with people.
Those were the 2 things that we were great at, and it allowed us to grow that business quickly and effectively. But because the infrastructure and the internal systems weren't on point, a lot of times money was just going everywhere, and cash flow was always a problem.
Yeah.
Cash flow was always an issue. And just so happened that cash flow was kind of my thing at the business.
Okay.
So
you felt pressure?
Oh, I felt immense stress and pressure.
You're trying to make payroll. You're trying to buy your new product, and there's not cash in the bank.
Yeah, I mean,
What do you do?
I'm sitting there on Sunday, thinking about going to work on Monday, knowing good and well that we've got, $60,000 worth of bills to pay and $20,000 in the bank.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay,
How do we make this work?
dude, like that's the first moment of my life where I like truly knew what stress was.
Yeah. Do you feel like you had like a panic attack at any of these moments over like you're like, there's no way this is going to work? Like, we got to figure out how to make it work, but I don't know how.
That was the first moment in my life where I truly had a panic attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I can remember being in the bathtub.
You remember where you at?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Hollering at my wife saying,
Something's wrong with me.
yeah, I think I need to go to the hospital.
Yeah, I giggle here. I've had one panic attack. I understand what they feel like. I was driving and I had to pull over because I felt like I was going to pass out. And I look back at the stress level that I had at that moment, and there was a lot of things going on.
A lot of underlying things.
Yeah, but in that moment, there wasn't a bunch of pressure on me exactly in that moment. It was very weird. It's like I couldn't stop thinking about this whole big circle of everything that I'd screwed up over the past year, and almost passed out while I'm driving. It was the craziest. I don't ever want to feel it again.
Yeah.
So
Scary feeling.
Beginning of the end for you there. What's next?
Well, I didn't know what was next. All I knew was that I had accumulated enough debt and enough responsibilities during that time. Amy and I had our first child together, and so Addie was probably 2 at that time. She was probably 1 at that time.
Okay.
She was probably 2 whenever I made the transition to getting in the insurance business, but I didn't know what the next step looked like. I just knew that I had X number of bills and I needed a job that was going to provide that X, at least that.
Yeah, and we got to eat too, and make a house note if we got car.
right.
If we have a car payment, we got to make these things got to get paid for, right?
That's right.
And if we're 0 after that with less stress, is that where you were at? It's like 0 with less stress. I'll take it.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
But I did know that this was in 2012. I knew that I wasn't going to hop into a coaching and teaching job and be able to hit that number.
So it was not an option.
That wasn't an option if I wanted, unless we wanted to sell everything and start over.
I think this is a good a question I'm about to ask. I think a lot of people deal with is like when you come to a career transition, what did you do to evaluate what you think you might want to do next? It's like there's so many options out there, and then sometimes there's this moment of like, well, I have confidence in what I can do, and there's sometimes the moment of like, I don't really have a whole lot of confidence in myself right now. And I relate that to sports and being in the batter's box. And when I'm confident, I hit the ball.
Yeah.
When I'm not confident, I don't hit the ball.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean I can't hit the ball.
That's true.
So where were you at, and then how did you kind of work in that transition of like, what the heck am I going to do now?
I had grown to understand where my strengths lie, and maybe where some of my weaknesses were as well. And I knew that cultivating relationships was something that was a gift that God had given me. I knew that work ethic and being able to just outwork whoever's next to me most of the time, was something that, was something I could lean into, and so really for me, it was like, well, there aren't just a whole lot of options where you could, right off the bat, make a pretty good living without a college degree or, for the most part, any type of degree.
Yeah.
And
you had a college degree though, right?
I did. Yeah. So I had my bachelor's degree, but again, the career path that my bachelor's degree led me to at least around here, I wasn't going to hop into a coaching and teaching job and be able to continue to pay my bills, you know? And so I just didn't feel like that was an option. And so I tried to think about, okay, these are my strengths. What can I do in that vein that's going to ultimately help put food on the table?
Yeah.
And I started thinking about sales jobs. That's what I
you were doing.
That's what I was doing. You know, yeah, I was doing the books and I was also, you know, writing the checks, but that was about the extent. You know, I was sending in 941s every quarter and handling a lot of our sales comptroller stuff and, you know, doing a lot of internal stuff. But for the most part, my biggest contribution to Antler Works was the relationships. I would go to shows. I would cultivate relationships with new customers, new retailers that were selling our products, nurture those relationships, and ultimately sell them our product.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was pretty good at it. You know?
So sales is sales as long as you're capable to learn a new product or service.
Pretty much.
It's connection.
I believe it is. Sales is relationships. Sales is finding a product, whatever that product may be, that you believe in, that you you know, feel is going to be a service of value to other people, and being able to show them that in a way where they desire to have it for themselves. And I was blessed to be able to do that, you know, and whenever, and so I knew a lot of insurance agents because I dealt with a lot of insurance agents with our business, and I knew, you know, I didn't know what kind of money they made. I just knew they lived comfortably and seemed to enjoy their jobs, you know, and so I reached out to a few, you know, just to kind of see what it looked like to get into that business, and it just so happened that's where I that's where I gravitated toward.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was a pretty quick transition once I made the decision. Once I made the decision, we moved right into it, and it was scary, but I felt confident based off of what my would-be mentors were telling me could be accomplished in the event that I do X, Y, and Z, that I felt confident in my ability to do it.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that I jumped in head first. Like you said, the promise was maybe taking a step back. You know, it wasn't that my bills were going to be fully paid right when I started.
Yeah.
But the opportunity was, you could far exceed your ability to pay your bills and build a better life for you and your family.
And a good potential boss is going to tell you like the low end, because they don't know how hard you're going to work at that point.
You can't judge. You can't measure.
You never know.
You can't measure.
I mean, you have an idea of a person's character if you've known them for a while, but you don't know. So transitioning from Antler Works to the insurance industry, what was that? You and I have talked a lot about in that type of sales industry, there's a lot of, they want to build you up so that you do better, right? There's some rah-rah stuff that's
recognition.
There you go. Okay.
Recognition.
Explain how that affected you.
Yeah, that's a great question, because it is very much a part of my journey. I feel like it was my journey back to the Lord, and ultimately my journey to getting on the path that He wanted me to be on for my life. But I don't want you to think Wolf of Wall Street,
right?
You know,
it's not that.
It's not that. It's not that. But there's a level of that, and the underlying thought process of go out, make a name for yourself, be at the top of every potential sales report, we're going to recognize that. We're going to reward you by paying you well and by, giving you wonderful things and sending you wonderful places and all of those things. And I jumped in head first again into the insurance business and had a lot of success. I did very well from a from a standpoint of what the company measures me on. Mm-hmm. And my name was at the top of all of those reports.
I like that you put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the best way for me to put it.
It's important to keep that in perspective.
Yeah. And so, that's what I was doing well, killing it, making a name for myself in the business, taking care of a lot of people. I wasn't doing it in a Wolf of Wall Street way.
Right.
Yeah. I was doing it. We sell products that help people take care of their families.
Yeah.
End of story. It's like, I'm still doing this today.
Yeah.
And I'm still just as passionate today as I was about the opportunity to help people take care of their families as I was almost 14 years ago when I first got into it. And so, that's, it sparked, that success really sparked a lot of selfish, ambitious spirit in me.
Do you feel like that, like you had that selfish, ambitious spirit before then? And was it like satisfied, or is this something new that was kind of creeping into your life? How?
I felt like that I had it, and that the making more money and having an opportunity to kind of inject some testosterone into that vein of selfish ambition is what happened. And
it's easy, man. That's easy. I mean, there's times in my life that I've had that, and it's pretty easy to recognize of like, it's always been business for me. I mean, very similar of when I have a big success in business, like sometimes my initial reaction is, whew, hey, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm doing pretty good, but the next is like, okay, it ain't about, it ain't about me. It ain't about you. So,
well, it was very much about me during that time. I started making more money than I had ever thought that I could make.
And you hadn't ever done that before, right?
Never done that before. And I was making more money, and all I could think about during that time was how I can spend that money to glorify me and my family more.
So give me an example of something that you start making more money, and then you have these dreams of like, I want this, I want that. Walk me through the process of wanting something, researching something that you're going to buy, buying something, and then the feeling after, and then the feeling 6 months after.
I mean, it's a temporary fulfillment process that you start, and then you realize that this doesn't make me happy, and then you start over, and it's the
next thing,
and it's a complete mind screw on, because I mean, during this time also, social media is heightening at its, so
in the beginning of social media, especially, or like when it's heightening, is like, it's only highlight reel.
It was already,
like it's getting a little bit more real.
It was already there.
Yeah.
I mean, we were already on Facebook and stuff when I think I got my first Facebook account in 2005 or 6 in college.
Okay.
May have been a little before that, but it didn't get really rolling where everybody's posting their highlight reel of their life.
Like, didn't I just see you in Mexico 2 weeks ago?
Right.
Are you just reposting pictures from 2 weeks ago, or did you go again?
That's right.
I wish I could have your life.
That's right. That's, and then you think, if you're already in that mindset, you think that you need to do that. Mm-hmm. Well, we need to do that. And that's going to bring us more joy, and that's going to bring us more peace and happiness. And we're going to it's just more dopamine.
I think, and also I think if you have the extra funds to do it and it's not going to hurt your finances, like to buy this thing and to buy that thing, it's, convicting is not the right word. It's less, it feels like less of an issue. Like I've bought things before that I know I couldn't afford.
Yeah.
And then I feel bad afterwards, but I've bought things before that I know that I didn't need. And it took a little bit longer for me to be like, I don't need that.
You convince yourself that you earn this.
Yeah.
You deserve it.
Yeah, you deserve it.
Yeah, I worked for this.
Is that something that is being taught as well? In the, I won't say your position, your company, but in the industry?
I think in the world, period.
Okay.
Oh yeah. It's not just it's not just in one particular industry or another. It's if I've had success in any realm, go show everybody, there's nothing wrong with, I earned this Lamborghini, or I earned this yacht, go to the extreme,
I earned this island.
That's right. And so again, you get this holier than now, selfishly motivated to go get the next thing because that's what the world's doing. And I got on this path, man. I got on this path of how can I keep up with these people? How can I look the part, play the part, and, get the things, and just a very extreme worldly mindset, that when you met me 5 years ago, was at an all-time heightened state. Mm-hmm. I was 8-9 years into my career. I was making more money than I had never made in my life. And, I was in the deepest state of a worldly, glorifying Obie mindset that I had ever been in that 35 years of life. And I was on this train track, so to speak, of worldly pleasures, and God just freaking stuck his fist up, and my train just shattered to pieces.
What happened?
It was right around COVID. It was right around COVID, and I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know if it was COVID, if it was the fear of COVID that COVID created in a lot of people's minds. It definitely created a fear in my mind. I've always struggled with health anxiety, with worrying that something was going to happen and I was going to get a deadly disease and die, or, something was going to, take me at a young age, mm-hmm. And I think COVID only amplified that.
Yeah. There was a ton of fear on the front side of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's right around, what are we, 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah. We're 5 years, almost
March.
Almost to the day.
Yeah. It was March.
Yeah.
2020.
Man, it's been 5 years. That's when God just stopped he stopped my world, and he put me on his track for my life.
What do you think? Do you think that the stopping, like COVID, like everything just stopped? You feel like being forced to
self-examine?
Yeah. Was that something that was going on?
I think so. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, I was forced to self-examine, and I didn't like what I saw. And,
you're looking in the mirror and like,
this is not, you're using, I always had this thought that God gave me these gifts to glorify him with them.
Yeah.
And I was glorifying myself with them. And I always had this deep conviction of, you're not doing this right, Obie. Like,
outwardly, you're saying that this is what you're doing it for, but inwardly,
Yes. Nothing dramatic happened in my life during that time other than a internal realization that I can't continue living this life the way that I'm living, and also say that I'm a Christian at the same time.
Had you been suppressing that for a while?
I would say so.
How long do you think you were trying to just push that down out of the way?
I would say probably 4 or 5 years.
And do you feel like it was continually like getting
deeper
surface?
Oh yeah,
push it down.
Yeah,
up, down. Like, I don't want to deal with this. I think the sin that we deal with the most hurts the most, and hurts to let go of the most. And we have to be so uncomfortable and disgusted with our sin that it's worth the pain of moving forward without it, or thinking that we can let go of it.
Yeah.
Because thinking that you can let go of it is these things that you enjoy.
Oh, yeah.
That we think we enjoy, right?
Well, we think we enjoy.
Yeah.
What you mentioned earlier about kind of going through the process of what that looks like as far as getting something that you think you want. It's very much a thought process of, I think that this is going to be something that I really enjoy. And more often than not, it's you get something that you use a few times or that you wind up selling, later and losing money on it, and it's just, I just realized that I just wasn't living for God. I wasn't living for him. And
so how have you been changed? It's in the sanctification process of the last 5 years. Like, where do you feel like you were, and like, how's God brought you through that? And do you still struggle with the same things, or, are you moved on and different things arise, or what?
My journey was abrupt. When I say that, like, he stopped my train, like where it was, that's the way that it felt. It felt like when he put me onto his track, I wanted to rid my world of anything that wasn't of him.
Okay.
I had deep struggles, on, should I sell everything that I have? Should I everything, I questioned everything that was going on. And if I didn't feel like it was right in that moment, I was like, get rid of it, get it out of here. I don't want it. And scared the heck out of my wife. She was like,
what?
I was like, well, what? You want to sell it all?
We built this dream house as our forever home.
That's right.
We're going to sell it.
It was a lot of me not knowing how to deal with all of the change that I felt like God was stirring up in me, at one time.
I think that's a great thought, is like going through it, you don't know how to handle it. And I think that just leads us to like seeking wise counsel as well when we're going through these big life changes, of like maybe finding somebody we trust that has gone through it, or that can just help us sift our thoughts, right? Because that's hard. Is like, do I just sell everything?
And that's where.
And then what do I do with the money?
Right. That's where I went. I would say that I went to a place of, I wanted to acquire biblical knowledge in a deeper way than I had ever felt, experienced, or like desired ever in my life. And I wanted to speak to everybody that I felt like could be an advocate for, my new path. I wanted to speak to anybody that I felt like had potentially been there. I wanted to read books. I wanted to do whatever I could for God to reveal to me how to deal with all of this change that I felt like he was stirring up in my heart.
And one of those things is this podcast.
Without a doubt.
Definitely spurred from the four of us, getting to that moment. So last thing, where are you at now? Like that was 5 years ago. How's the Lord grown you to now, and what does your day-to-day relationship with the Lord look like?
Great question. Now I know that I'm on the right path. And there's something very wonderful and peaceful and hopeful when you look forward and know that you're on God's path. You know it. You don't know the obstacles that you're going to face. You know they're going to be there. You know there's going to continue to be trial, and there's going to be days that really suck. You know, being on God's path doesn't mean that I'm not going to have trial and tribulation, but there is a peace of knowing that you are on it. And so I know that unequivocally, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm on his path. And so, you know, I've learned so much. You know, I've learned that I'm broken and that it's okay to be broken. And, you know, there was a part of me that always felt like that I had to be perfect. I had to do everything right, you know, and that's just not the case. You know, I've learned that through life, you know, and you know, where I'm at is over the course of this last 5 years, you know, in the first 35 years of my life, I probably had read 3 books.
I was going to ask you that,
you know,
I know you read a lot from the time I've known you.
Yeah. For the last 5 years,
you probably read.
I've probably read
150 books,
a few hundred, maybe. Books, you know, and most of those in the vein of, you know, what Scripture teaches about certain areas of life, you know, and how to deepen my relationship with Christ, and you know, that was something that was very much revealed to me very shortly after, you know, I got on the right path, and that was what a relationship with Christ looks like. For 35 years, I didn't know. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't understand, you know, what it meant to truly have a conversation with Jesus.
Till you started seeking.
That's right. And I learned that building a relationship with Christ is no different than me building a relationship with you. You know, it's the same. You know, how do we cultivate our relationship? You know, we cultivate it through interaction, through spending time together, through asking each other questions, and
through hugging each other.
That's right. All the good stuff.
Grabbing your butt.
Yeah, he loves.
I don't do that. I do.
That's just Shane, by the way. Shane's the only one that does that.
All right. So last thing, there's somebody out there that's struggling with this life of self-glorification, and they're feeling that like God wants them to do something different, and they're suppressing. What would you say to them in that camera right there?
What would I say to someone who is living a life of self-glorification and not...
but they know how they're just struggling with it, where you were at, where for the 4 or 5 years, it's like, I know this is not how I'm supposed to live, but I'm glorifying myself, and I just keep pushing it down. What would you say to encourage them to let go?
I would say that there is only temporary fulfillment in anything outside of the hope of Christ. That's it. It's a temporary fulfillment. It's a temporary just piece of joy, you know, that we only get to experience, that doesn't lead to any type of long-lasting peace and joy. And the Bible tells us that if we ever desire to experience true peace and joy, it's going to be cultivated in our lives through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I would say to turn, as hard as it is, because it is pushed at us from every angle of our lives, from social media to every store that you walk in, to every vacation that you go on. It's how can I receive more gratification and worldly pleasure from these things that are being marketed to us on a day in and out basis. And everybody thinks, okay, well, I'll go on this vacation. It's going to solve my problems. I'll go on this, I'll do this thing. I'll buy this thing. It's going to solve all my problems. And it doesn't solve anything. And so I would just encourage people to, don't look to the world to fulfill your hope. look to Jesus. He's the only one that can fill that void in your life that you're experiencing. And so he's our only hope. So I would tell them to fill that void with God, fill them with Jesus.
Hey, thanks for being vulnerable today, man. That was good.
The uncomfortable truth.
The uncomfortable truth. Thank y'all for joining us. If you're watching on TikTok, go to YouTube and subscribe over there. If you're on YouTube, go to Instagram and subscribe over there. If you haven't heard us on the podcast, you can go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe there, leave a review. That's a lot of things to do. I know you have a lot to do today, but honestly, we're thankful not for us, but for Jesus. And if it, hopefully it helps move you to a closer relationship with him. The subs don't matter. Really all it does is put it in front of somebody else. So that's it. That's all we're asking for, is you to help put it in front of somebody else. Hey, go kick the day in the face, and we'll catch you on the next one.